Hello, everyone. I'm Pranav Krishnamurthy with TCS and Microsoft to bring to you the Shifts Kronos integration, which will be able to migrate data from Kronos Workforce Central into Microsoft Shifts. Before we get into the actual demo, I'm going to outline the architecture and talk a little bit about what are the critical pieces to this for making this integration work. We have our tenant admin, which will impersonate that role, who will access a configuration web app where the tenant admin can be able to provide their Kronos credentials, be able to register Kronos as a workforce integration with Microsoft Graph, map the users in a.a.d. to the users in Kronos, as well as map a team in Shifts to a department in Kronos. Also, with the integration, we have an integration service API, which is responsible for exchanging the data in a bidirectional manner. Anytime that there is an action that an FLW performs, if they are to request an open shift or request to swap a shift, the integration API will be listening for that operation and also communicate with Kronos to post and to retrieve data. As mentioned, the three roles that we will be demonstrating are the tenant admin, which will use the configuration web app, the firstline worker, which I briefly alluded to make any open shift requests, time off requests, swap shift requests, and finally the firstline manager. The firstline manager has the job of approving or declining requests, and those actions must be performed in Kronos. Now I'm going to walk you through the configuration web app, which for this demo, all the resources and all the web services have been deployed onto an Azure subscription using an Azure Resource Management template or an ARM template. So here we are at the configuration web app at the home page. The tenant admin, they will log in with their a.a.d. credentials and they will navigate over to the home page where, as I said before, the tenant admin can be able to establish Kronos as a workforce integration. So just to demonstrate the authentication mechanism here, I'm going to quickly sign in, select the admin account, and we'll be logging in as the tenant admin. And as you can see, a couple of key things to note. We have it such that the tenant ID that the tenant admin belongs to actually is populated in the tenant ID text box. And even though I could populate the Kronos, and right now we also, for the sake of brevity, have registered Kronos as a workforce integration with Microsoft Graph, as noted with the information below, and also the submit button has been disabled. I'll go ahead next to proceed to the user. So to quickly go over what's at the bottom of the screen, the tenant ID is the ID of the tenant that the tenant admin belongs to, which case it's 34 Bravo, has been shown in the text box and the grid here. The Kronos super username is basically the service level or the admin account of Kronos. So in this case, we have a dev instance, so the username is mdiaz. And finally, we have our Kronos API endpoint, which is denoted by the link here. Again, for brevity, we have already registered this instance of Kronos as a workforce integration, and we will be proceeding with that. Should you as a tenant admin need to change something, you would have to actually delete this in order to re-register Kronos as your workforce integration. Again, for the sake of this demo, we have registered Kronos and we'll be proceeding further. We're going to go and map the users between a.a.d. and Kronos, as mentioned before. And again, I already have a template, but the normal way of going about it is you would export first, and which you would get an Excel file that has two tabs in it. The first tab will have the a.a.d information, meaning the a.a.d user, the a.a.d object ID, the name of the user, and the UPN, or the user principal name. It'll also have a second tab that has Kronos related details. And the Kronos details would be the Kronos org job path of that specific user. It'll be the Kronos username and the person number. So for the sake of brevity, I'm going to import, and you will see that we have the Kronos shift user mapping template right here. And you can see that we've imported successfully. And as I mentioned before, the template will take into account, which you as a tenant admin will have to populate. We'll give you a blank file. We'll give you all the columns that are required, which are the columns that you see here. The Kronos org job path, Kronos person number, Kronos username, the shifts a.a.d object ID of that user, the shifts user display name, and the shifts user principal name. Not the number, it's the name. You also want to, after doing this, you'd want to map your teams and your departments. And the flow of establishing the mapping is similar. You would export your data, which you'll get another Excel file that has two tabs, one that has Kronos department related info, and the other will have shifts related info. So what's the shifts team name, the shifts team ID, the schedule group ID, and the schedule group name. I'm going to import for one team and one scheduling group. And you notice the file is Kronos shift team department mapping template. Again, once you click on download template, you'll get an empty Excel file, one tab that has all these columns defined there. The Kronos workforce integration ID, which actually comes from Microsoft Graph once you click on register on the home page. Now that we have our prerequisites, I'm going to quickly talk about the Azure Logic app and also describe what are the API methods that are going to be called. So upon the user-to-user mapping, there is a specific done button. And I'm not going to click that just yet because the done button and the Azure Logic app mirror each other, with the one difference that the done button is only clicked once, and the Azure Logic app will basically perform the same functionality, but on a set interval that the tenant admin through the ARM template that the tenant admin through the ARM template can configure. Here are the endpoints actually that are going to be called by both the done button and the Azure Logic app. Keep in mind, the Shifts Kronos integration API has already been deployed onto Azure, the same resource group where our configuration web app resides is the same resource group that the integration API is to reside. So upon the click of the done button, and for every Logic app run, the following APIs are going to be called. The Shift API, which will sync shifts from Kronos into shifts. The OpenShift, swap shift approval, OpenShift request approval, time off reasons, and time off requests. These are the entities that the API will sync from Kronos into shifts. So in Kronos, we've set up data for 2 weeks between the 8th of December and the 21st. The first week we're going to have data for Sarah Benson will sync the time offs and the shifts on the 8th and the 14th. We will also be syncing Chloe Campus, who has one shift on the 12th of December. We'll then also be syncing Raja Caparelli's shift on the 11th. In the second week, we're going to be syncing one open shift on the 16th, and we'll be syncing Sarah Benson's shift on the 17th, Chloe's shift on the 18th, and finally syncing Roger's shift on the 20th. I am logged into I'm logged into Teams, on Chrome as the admin, who will be able to view all the users' data, all the open shifts, times off, and shifts. As mentioned before, first-line managers should be using shifts as your UI or as your place to view all the data that's coming in. All of the actions that a first-line manager conducts have to be done in Kronos. As you can see, for the 2 weeks between the 8th of December and the 21st of December, we do not have any data, and we will be now syncing all that through the done button. And once the entities are successfully synced, the tenant admin would get a notification on the configuration web app. Moving over to shifts now, as you can see, we have our entities synced. If I look in the first week, if I look into the second week, we have our open shift, that one open shift on the 16th that I referred to, and all the shifts for the users here. Also, should the tenant admin want to double check the sync, they can click on the done button once more, and the data that has already been synced will not duplicate. Once I go back into shifts, as you can see, no data has changed. Nothing has actually been duplicated. I'm actually going to now go ahead and I'm going to, for the sake of the demo, the Logic app has been set up, but has not been enabled. We're going to be doing a lot of the functionality using the done button today. And my first action I'm going to take as a first line manager as well, I'm going to delete a shift for Chloe on the 12th. And I'm going to click on the done button, and the output would be that there should be no shift in the first week for Chloe. So Chloe campus 1 to 2, I delete that, save it, go back to user, click on done. It's synced, and as you can see, the shift gets deleted. The next step I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add a shift for Roger on the 13th, and I will add an open shift on the same day as well. The expected result when I click on the done button is that the new shift and the newly created open shift should sync. So I'll go into Kronos and I will make sure to create the open shift first on the 13th. So I'm going to add a shift. And going to, in Kronos, the job transfer. When you're adding an open shift, it is important that you add the job transfer, which only means to say, okay, which org job path or which team are we adding an open shift for? So in this case, it's the front end cashier, and I'll keep a small open shift. Let's say it's 15 minutes between 9 a.m. and 9:15 a.m. And as you can see, it'll compute the date to be the 13th of December. Click on apply, and I'll save that. And as you can see, front end cashier added. And I'm going to add a shift for Roger on the same day as well, between the hours of 8 in the morning and 11. I'll go back to our config web app and go back to shifts. As I said before, there is no open shift on the 13th. There's no shift for Roger on the 13th. So the expected result upon the click of the done button is that the open shift would be added for the 13th, as well as Roger's shift on the 13th would be added. We get a successful notification here. Go over and we have our open shift that we've added and our shift that we've added for Roger. The next step is, as a first line manager, let's say that Sarah Benson has a shift on Friday and it is between 4 and 5. And for some reason, she has to stay 1 hour later. So instead of 4 to 5, the first line manager tells Sarah you have to stay between 4 and 6. So on the 14th, what I'll be doing inside of Kronos is I'm going to update this shift, and I'm going to have it such that between 4 and 5, there'll be some regular activity be done. Between 5 and 5:30, there's going to be a break. So between 5, so I'll just add a break here. Between 5 and 5:30. And between 5:30 and 6 would be some kind of an activity. Call it as regular here. I'm going to apply the change. I'm going to save it. Go back to our configuration web app, and I'm going to click on Done. Well, looks like it wasn't 4 to 6. Manager changed his mind as 4 to 6:30. And still, whatever entities and whatever changes have been made originally to the 4 to 5 shift have now been reflected between 4 and 6:30. Our next activity is, as an FLW or first line worker, I'm going to request a time off, and I'm going to use the done button to bring the time off from shifts into Kronos. So to do that, I've logged in as Sarah Benson on Firefox, and I've logged into Teams, went into the Shifts app as Sarah Benson on Firefox here, and I'm going to request a time off on, let's go back to the schedule for a second here, so that I can pick a date. Let's say the 11th, that Sarah Benson decides to take a time off for whatever reason. So I'm going to make a request and have it done for the 11th. Keep it to be that day, so start and end date are the same. She's taking a personal holiday. I'm going to send it over. I'm going to go ahead back to the config web app. I'm going to click on the done button, and what will happen is the time off request should go from shifts into Kronos. To see whether or not that's the case, I go into the request manager and I go to the time off. As you can see, the record at the bottom of the screen here shows that it's been submitted. Sarah Benson, S. Benson, is the one who requested it, and the API, which is also bidirectional, has taken the time off request from shifts, put it into Kronos, and as the first line manager, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to approve it. Saying that Sarah has been excused. And as you can see, the status updates to approved. And now again, I'm going to be clicking on the done button to bring that approval back into shifts. As the entities have been synced, so the real test is that the request has been approved, and if I go into Sarah Benson's view as well, the 11th has been approved by mod admin, who in this case would be the manager. Couple of other things to note with a time off request. Once the time off request has been created by the user, it would appear in the manager view on shifts first, and then the approval via the done button has actually changed that time off request into an actual time off that's been approved. Next, we're going to go with the swap shift, and the swap shift is an operation. The swap shift, or requesting to swap a shift, is a real-time operation that happens between two users. We're going to go into the first week itself, and a couple of points to note: 8 to 11 and 4 to 6:30. With swap shift, you have to the timing of the swap shift is critical. That, let's say if Sarah is to request a swap with Roger. Let's see. So logging into Firefox again. I'm going to swap on the 13th with Roger. And a couple of points to note: the start and end times of each of these are different. So now that the swap has actually been initiated by Sarah, a couple of points to note. This actually goes into Kronos and puts this as an offered state. And I will show you that. As you can see, the last line on the screen here, the last record, we see that Sarah and Roger are swapping, and it's been put into an offered state. Once the second first-line worker, or we say FLW2, which in this case is Roger, once Roger accepts it, it would go into a submitted state where the first-line manager in Kronos can actually approve. So I'll log in here on Edge as Roger Caparelli to accept Sarah Benson's request. So now that I've logged into Edge as Roger Caparelli, I see that there's a notification that Sarah has requested a swap. I'm going to say, let's say that Roger puts a note in, clicks on accept. What would actually happen now is that the manager is supposed to be providing the final decision whether they approve or decline. So in Kronos, if I look at this last record, it actually should go from an offered state to submitted. Which it does. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to approve. And as you can see as well, whatever comments that have been provided by Roger, for example, it says looks good to me, comes in, and I'm just going to click as the manager, I'm going to approve here. Now through done button, we're going to sync the swap through the configuration web app, again, to mimic the logic app functionality. And to make the determination, as you can see here, the done button actually swaps the shifts between the users, and in the actual request view of the manager, you'll see it's all checked across, it's all green, which means it's good. Inside of Sarah, you can see that the manager has approved the swap. Inside of Roger's view as well, the manager has approved a swap. So this basically closes the swap shift request. Finally, we're going to go with the OpenShift request approval. And an OpenShift request, what happens is that we have a real-time outbound call that is being made from shifts to the integration service, to the integration API. We're going to use the OpenShift that's been created on the 16th, and Roger will be requesting that OpenShift. Also, on the manager view, when I look over here, it says that there are 0 requests in a very grayed out text. It should change to 1, which would signify, oh, that it's Roger that requested the OpenShift. So a couple of things to note. We see that Roger has requested the OpenShift. When I go into Kronos, you can see the Roger Caparelli, it's submitted, and it's between the timing of 9 and 9:15 in the morning on the 16th of December. I can go ahead and I can approve as the FLM. I can provide any FLM or Firstline manager, and I can approve this. So when it comes to the OpenShift request approval, we have an API specifically for that, and it would be triggered by the logic app. But again, for the sake of the demo, since the logic app has been set up but not enabled, I'm going to hit the API endpoint directly. And we have this endpoint URL here. Now that we got an OK message, a couple of things should happen, and actually does. Before we had an OpenShift in green at the top OpenShifts row. Now the fact that once Roger requested, it still was there. The reason why it moved from this OpenShifts row down to Roger's row is because of the OpenShift request approval that I, as the Firstline manager, had given to Roger. Once I also go into Roger's view on shifts, if I go into the requests, we see that the shift request has been approved by the manager. Thank you guys for watching the demo.